you can give me or join me in giving a warm welcome to Camille and Spencer Nugent.
Hey everybody, can you hear me? All right, I'm not.
Yep, we're good. Did we have a clicker?
Know what to do.
Oh, okay, cool. We're doing this old school. Thanks for the introduction, Mark. It's an honor to be here. And this is actually my first time speaking with Camille, so this is actually a really great experience for me. What Mark may not have told you is we're both from the tiny island of Jamaica in the Caribbean, or Caribbean as we say. And I'm also terrified of deer, absolutely terrified of deer. Don't underestimate them. No,
he
I'm
loves
serious.
It. This is so his jam. I'm the one who's terrified.
Terrifying. Mm-hmm. I tried out for American Idol once, true story. And my sister Camille, she was actually born with 11 fingers.
Yes. But that's a story for another time. What we're going to talk about today is symmetry. And usually when you talk about symmetry, what comes to mind is balance, and that could be in art, or in design, or in science, or in the way we live our lives. So Spencer and I wanted to dig a little bit deeper. So when we talked about this, we started brainstorming, came up with words that kind of grabbed us and meant something to us. One that really stood out is convergence. And what Spencer and I are going to talk about today is how we came together. But we have to go back to the beginning. We grew up, as we said, in Little Island, Jamaica. We were really close. There were kind of two separate families. There were three of us who grew up together, the younger siblings, and then two older siblings. We come from a family of artists and scientists and engineers and musicians. And we've always just spent really close time together. We grew up really, really tightly. However, as life happens, we kind of grew apart. So in our adulthood, we diverged a bit. And it's only been in the last 4 years or so that we've come together again, and now Spencer is one of my best friends. And how that plays out is...
Well, the interesting thing about us is we took a look at our backgrounds, like Camille said, art, science, engineering, and we both started from different places, and we've kind of ended up in the same industry, so to speak. My background is actually in mathematics, computer science, engineering. That's what I wanted to do. Pretty quickly, though, as I got into linear algebra, differential equations, calculus, advanced calculus, I realized the numbers were disappearing and it wasn't fun anymore. But really, truly, what I loved about math wasn't so much the numbers, it was the creative problem solving that comes with working on equations.
And on my part, I started out in visual art. So I've always kind of been in that area. I studied fine arts. My BFA was in drawing and painting. And I actually wanted to become a professor. So I was accepted to Parsons in New York for my grad degree for my MFA, and I was going to go there. But again, life happens, and I ended up working here at BYU first, at the Center for Instructional Design, but also at a company called Certiport, which is how I kind of got in touch with Adobe in the first place. And there I started really delving into design, and the fine arts kind of moved out of the way a bit, except in a hobby sense. But my career path started to go towards design, more towards design.
So we're both non-traditional in a lot of ways.
Non-traditionally taught.
Here we are in Utah. We're two black designers. I know.
That too.
Started from different backgrounds, and preparing for this presentation, like, it's really brought us closer together. And even learning that Camille wanted to teach, I wanted to be a high school math teacher, right? Crazy. Yeah, and here we are. That. So to kick off our exercise, our brainstorming, like Camille said, we thought of a bunch of words. Convergence is kind of what we settled on. We challenged each other with coming up with a list of words to inspire us about what we're going to talk about today. And we ended up picking two words that coincidentally ended up being antonyms to each other.
Spencer's column was on the left, mine was on the right. I picked one from his, he picked one from mine. So
I picked the word expectation. And so to kick things off, I just want to talk a little bit more about my background and kind of my journey and how I've ended up at this point. So like I said, math major, ended up doing design at BYU as well, and have had the opportunity to travel and teach and do a lot of things. But because I came from a scientific or fact-based background, not alternative facts, real facts, people, I tend to approach, as a young designer, I tend to approach my process in a very methodical, way. And was very just by the book. In fact, Symmetry was one of my favorite tools to use, but it turns out it's pretty boring. You got to have some asymmetry in your process. And one of the experiences that really changed me for the better as a designer, I had the opportunity to work for General Motors as a car designer intern. And what's interesting about that is I wasn't a car design student. I just had the ability to draw cars really well. And so off I go to try this thing out of my comfort zone, go to GM, and I just had this expectation in my mind of what the experience would be. And I amped myself up so much, and I was like really psyched out and stressed out. And it was the worst summer ever. And I've thought a lot about that summer because, like I said, I learned a lot of things from that experience. One, ideas tend to be bigger in our heads than reality sometimes. And two, when you're stressed, it's really hard to be creative and do your best work. Even though I could draw cars, and I draw fairly well, a lot of my work was just completely not good from that experience. And since then, as Mark mentioned, I've had a lot of experiences being able to create a lot of products. So industrial design deals with physical products as well. And so these are just a few examples of work that I've done over the years. And so in that time frame when I was so steeped in expectations about myself, expectations about the experience, and I had that bad experience, it actually taught me a really profound lesson about letting go of those expectations and embracing impermanence, which also happens to be Camille's word.
My story is not necessarily design related, but it will tie into what we're going to speak on next. It's a story that's really close to me. So we grew up, we're thinking, oh, I'm invincible, I'm young, I can go snowboarding, fall over, break myself, I'm fine, just bounce right back up. Or, good health is just something you have until you don't. I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease 15 years ago, and that really just threw a wrench in my life. I was on heavy medication, I was super sick, I gained 30 pounds in a month, and I was just really embarrassed to go out.
She was depressed.
I was very depressed about it. Stop it, you made me cry. Anyway, so based on that, your life is a moving, flowing, fluid entity. And, it's impermanent. Obviously, we're all going to die someday, but even along that path, along that timeline, there are moments that can be life-changing, and this was one of them for me. So when I did put on that 30 pounds, I thought, you know what? I'm going to change this. I'm going to create a life that's different, that works for me. So I started working out. I would work out in the living room because I was too embarrassed to go anywhere, go to the gym. And I started to lose weight a little bit, and then I went to a gym that was close to my work, again at Certiport, where I was working with Adobe. And one of the trainers there talked to me, and she said, have you ever thought about competing? And I said, no, never, because I'm actually what you'd call an extroverted introvert, so I'm mostly very shy, but I can,
She's extra.
Stop it. I can be extra, as Spencer says. I can go up to somebody in a crowd, I can make friends really easily, but there's certain things like this that completely terrify me. And competing sounded like a very terrifying prospect to me. But I thought, you know what? Why not? I'll give it a shot. So I trained really hard, and during the process, I was also looking for ways to really improve my health and create a life that was beneficial to me. So my doctors had me on up to 20 pills a day, and I was still feeling really sick, and so I started doing research, trying to figure out what actually would work for me. And I found a diet that actually helped reset my system. And while I was doing that, I was also training for this competition, and I did it, and it was one of the most amazing, life-changing experiences that I could even think of. And I feel like this aside, this is how I try to approach my life and my art and my craft and my career. Life is going to throw wrenches at you. You might have something come up that's going to completely throw your life out of whack, but you accept the changes, you accept that fluidity, and this is how I work with my life. So, as I said, I wanted to be an MFA and be a professor of art, but somehow ended up doing graphic design. I've had my own consultancy. I've worked in education space, in IT. I've worked with startups, but the fine arts have kind of gone to the wayside a little bit. But I also try to bring that into the design that I do. So you can see it in the way that I work. I try to use a lot of depth and painterly aspects in my work. So kind of bringing my formal training into what I do and love right now.
And like I mentioned, this whole exercise has been interesting because we've been able to realize all the overlaps in our life. I too love working out. I'm not going to compete. She keeps inviting me, but I'm not going to do it.
I think you could.
No. And even the way we work in a non-traditional sense, using different media, or I didn't mention this, but I actually design furniture as well and do interior design on the side, and we do a lot of different things. And so we just found that really there was a lot of symmetry in our lives, and here we are at this moment. We live close to each other now. Like it's been interesting to just be a part of this converging moment together. But really, we've always been buddies. We've always been friends, and from the very beginning, we've been making art together. And it's February. It's Black History Month, so we're going to talk a little bit about Black history as well. What are you going to say? Okay, so Jinx. Hey.
Last year, Spencer was approached by Adobe to kind of head up this Black History Month exhibit. And this was held at Adobe last year. And Spencer called me up in a panic. He's like, oh my God, can you help
actually,
me?
we got to backtrack a little bit. Actually, I was chilling at work one day, and I got this email from a guy named Josh James. And you might think that's the Domo guy, but no. Just another guy that happens to be named Josh James. And so he wanted to create this event that would highlight Black artists in Utah, which, as it turns out, is really difficult to do. I don't know why, though, but it's really difficult to do. And so it was a really great experience. We scrambled and we worked together.
This was over like a week and a half, putting all this together, finding the artists, creating the work, putting the exhibit up, and then having the opening reception.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
And so the theme we were given, or we decided on rather, was perspective. And so we'll talk a little bit about both our pieces, and I'll turn it over to Camille for now.
Yeah. Again, it was kind of like a really quick thrown together experience at the time. We would like to move forward and do more events like this. In fact, in a few months, we're going to have something here at Adobe, highlighting Black artists, but that's for another time. But when we did come up with perspective, we thought, okay, what is our perspective on being Black, being an artist, being here in Utah, coming from another country, being displaced? So in my point of view, I feel sometimes that I'm judged. Well, I think a lot of people, regardless of the color of your skin, you're judged just on the first meeting. But I think when you are an other, that happens even more so. And I've seen it here in Utah. I've seen it when I've traveled around the world, and it's been difficult. Like I've had people like touch and pull at my hair or call me names. Not the worst name, but I've been called pretty horrible names just because of how I look, and they don't see past that to know that I'm a person. I have musical tastes that maybe overlap with yours, or maybe I like the same kind of food as you do. Maybe, even though I'm from Jamaica, maybe I've had very American sorts of experiences because, like, we grew up with a satellite dish and we watched American TV. So there are just ways in which you may be judged or seen without being really seen. And so that's what my piece spoke to.
And so Camille's piece is on the left. We worked together to create all the assets for the event, the visual branding. Again, it was a mad dash scramble, and Camille is incredible. She turned this overnight, practically. Came up with the whole theme,
crazy.
and it just
working right through. It
just worked.
Yeah.
So my piece, it speaks to a bit of my background, being somewhat rigid, grounded in science, if you will. So we have a cube. That's the one on the right. And the piece, I titled it "The Perfect Fit," The Perfect Fit. And I wanted to challenge myself to paint. I don't usually paint. And so I wanted to create a piece that spoke to my background, that I could leverage my industrial design training. We do a lot of geometric object sketching, because if you think about the things that people use, humans use, we tend to create things from what are called primitives, basic geometry. So I wanted that to be a foundational part of the piece. But more importantly, like Camille said, part of being different and other in a place where you may not see people like you a lot, there's often this feeling that I've had that, hey, I don't quite fit in. So again, there's some convergence there, similarity in our experiences. And so the lighting, the shapes, the color, the suggestion that the inviting light, trying to pull this ball in, is meant to convey the idea that I don't quite fit, but I want to be there. And so that was my piece that I created for the event. So, like we said, we've been on this journey. We've had disparate experiences, but here we find ourselves at this point in life where there's just been a lot of interesting overlap. We're both now creative. We're both at a point in our careers where we keep having this conversation. We need to do something together. We need to do something together. We're not sure what that's going to be yet, but definitely something will happen. Oh, here it is right now. We're done.
We're doing like little things here and there, but we want to collaborate more. Like I said, we come from a family of creatives, but of everyone in our family, Spencer and I have had the most overlap, have had the most synergy and symmetry and coming together, and we want to really explore that a bit more. So this is really exciting for us too.
Okay, so presentation part's over. You can leave. Just kidding. We'll do Q&A. I know that we kind of, at least I kind of blew through part of my my part of the presentation. So if you have any questions or you want us to go back, whatever, totally fine. I'll let Camille answer that one, because I don't know.
Well, we grew up.
Oh, the question was, I kind of missed this in the beginning, but what brought your family to the United States?
Okay. We grew up in the LDS faith. Spencer and I happened to have diverged from that, but again, converged in the way that we did that. So as part of that, our parents wanted all of their children to go to BYU, and we did. My first love was fashion design, actually, so that's what I wanted to study. And when I got to BYU, they had just closed a fashion design program the year before. And our parents are only going to send us to BYU. So I was like, what else do I love? And I love to paint and draw. So I thought, I'm going to choose painting and drawing as my major, and that's how I ended up here. And Spencer also went to BYU.
Yeah, I was the last kid at home on the island.
Just a baby.
It was grim. Have you seen the movie Mad Max? Kind of like that. And we decided we got to get out of there. So we came here and tried the math, computer science thing, like I said, ended up doing design ultimately. Anyone else? We don't buy it, I promise.
Your work in any way?
So the question was, it sounded like our family is creative. Did our family or upbringing or circumstance influence our creativity? That's a really great question. So for me personally, I would say our mother was probably the more artistic, creative person, and I'm using that term liberally because I have fond memories of her talking on the phone with friends you remember she would doodle? And she would just
You
doodle
wanted
for
to write
hours.
children's books and illustrate them.
And it was just random stuff. She'd doodle and play word games. And so we were exposed to that. On the flip side, our father, he was by training a chemist and biologist or zoologist, I guess. And in his spare time, he actually went to school to be a fine art paintist. Ooh. This is why I'm a designer and not a writer. Like, oof. So he would paint, and so we were exposed to kind of the art and science, if you will, as children. So I remember him painting. I remember my mom doodling. Our oldest sister, she's also a fine artist, painter. She works in museums, and actually is a consultant now for museums. And I'd say our brother that's just older than us, he's also creative. He
wanted to be
paints.
an architect, and he ended up being an engineer, and then he went and got his MBA, and now he's in finance.
He was
so
smart,
it's just
and
all over.
now he makes good money. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So does that answer your question? Cool. In the back?
Wanted to know what for you are the pros and cons of being artists in Utah and being a minority artist in Utah?
That is a great question. I'm going to go answer first.
Yes.
Okay, because it's been on my mind a lot. So I met with a mentor of mine a few months ago, and one of the things he said that was interesting is, as a designer, when someone comes to you, they're hiring you because you know something they don't, right? And that got me thinking, like, what do I know that other people don't? You know, my experiences are unique to me, and so I've been thinking of ways to perhaps try to leverage my cultural upbringing, which I guess ties into the previous question, and implement that in my design process. I would say challenges being in Utah. I haven't been an independent contractor here so much as Camille has, so I'll let her speak to that side. But in a corporate setting, I've tried to take the opportunity to ask questions, and I'll just share a quick story. So we were working on this project at Vivint Smart Home, and there was a proposed user experience that involved law enforcement. And okay, maybe this is a touchy subject, but when the police show up, I'm like, okay, I'm dead. So I asked the question to the group, hey, have you guys, talked to minorities about this concept? Just to get their sentiment. And it was a good opportunity to show people like, hey, maybe this idea that we've created in a silo isn't necessarily appropriate for all people. So let's think about ways to perhaps refine that experience. But yeah, I'll let Camille speak to the consulting side.
Well, this might be a small thing, but the one that stands out to me the most, and this is across the board in any company I've worked with and any kind of consultancy I've done, is, just collateral pieces. So I might be doing a brochure, I might be doing some kind of ad, or I might be repurposing something that somebody else had done. And I think, everybody looks kind of the same in this piece, so I might throw a black girl in there, bring in an Asian lady, or something that speaks to the other, where I don't want to feel so homogenous. And I know that Utah is increasing in diversity right now, but I want to be able to, in small ways, push that forward. That's what I see.
Hi, I'll bring you a mic.
Hot mic coming in.
I have two questions.
You get one question.
Oh,
I'm just kidding. Two's cool.
Okay, I just looked you both up on, and I know this is really old-fashioned for old people like me, but Facebook, and I was trying to figure out how to follow you, and Camille doesn't have a place to friend people, or at least people like me.
Kind of off.
And you do have a place to do a friend request, but I thought that was a little too much to do. So I'd like to be able to follow you and find out if you checked out what each other was wearing and how you're branding, and is that New Orleans or no?
Wait, repeat the last slide again?
Well, it was about if the two of you collaborated on the outfits that you were wearing, and if the NO was for New Orleans or if it had
this is a shirt from a concert, but it comes in real handy in meetings when people ask you questions. You can just unzip your jacket, flex, that Shia LaBeouf video. No, it's just a concert T-shirt I like. I'm really easy to find online. I usually just tell people to just Google me. It's easy. There's
I'm not
websites
that easy to
and
find.
Instagram and YouTube and all that stuff. So totally fine. You're right. Probably better just follow me on Instagram or YouTube first. Then, it's kind of like dating once you get to know each other. Then send a friend request. Usually I reject friend requests, but for you, I'll make an exception.
I get a ton of friend requests, and I'm like, do I know this person? But it's my personal account. I really should kind of broaden the scope here and do something that's more for the public. As far as our outfits, we did one of our last run-throughs last night. And then I was like, what are you going to wear? And he said, I could go lumberjack, I could go sleek, I could do this. And I was like, well, tell me so I can figure this out. So he said, I'm just going to wear all black. And I thought, I'm going to wear some color. So that's how we came here.
So you said you teach some tutorials online. How can we find that? And what kind of tutorials do you go through? Do you go through a design process, logo, branding?
Good question. And realizing that there are two questions along the same lines, we probably should have included our websites in the deck so you could follow. So if you open your phones right now and go to Instagram, sketch a day, DOTCOM, that's me. Or just search for Spencer Nugent, you'll find me.
And I'm just first name, last name.
Legit, if you just Google me. Now, as far as the tutorials go, my specialty is in visual communication through sketching and drawing, because I believe it's a powerful tool that anyone can learn and do. I have YouTube tutorials that primarily focus on product sketching, so physical objects, but really you can leverage those tools to do anything. I don't really actually put a lot of personal work online that is industrial design specific. Most of it is educational. On Instagram, you'll find just random sketches that I'll do every day. If you use Procreate, you can go to my website and there's brushes you can download. I also have sketchbooks available, not actual sketchbooks, but compilations of sketches that I've done that you can also acquire as well.
And then, as I said, mine's just CamilleNugent.com. I don't have very much of an online social presence. Most of it is very personal to me, but I could change that.
Can you talk a little bit about your design processes, maybe something that we can all take away from to where you grab inspiration from when you're coming up with your concepts for whether it's fine art, design, illustrating? So, as we both said, neither one of us has been very formally trained in what we do, for the most part, 70-90% of what we do right now. So my process kind of stems from a fine art background, and I feel like I just like to pull ideas together. And I like to work a lot in collages and different sorts of media, maybe pulling in some typography, but even in the design I do, I like to feel very painterly. Even if I'm using one of the Adobe Suite products, I will do something that looks very painterly, because that's just from my background. So I like to do builds and lots of layering, and just till I feel like I'm at a point where I just need to stop, I do a little bit more, and I take a little bit away. So adding, and then subtractive until I feel like, in my head, it's done.
Yeah, I was just thinking about my answer as Camille was talking. That's a pretty big question, because design is in general pretty broad, and I consider myself more of a creative/designer than specifically in industrial design at this point in my career. In fact, most days now I spend my time in Keynote or on a whiteboard, and I'm not so involved in the use of tools that are specific to my profession or my foundational training in industrial design. As far as the process goes, however, I believe that as a designer, much like the topic of the presentation, there's symmetry and balance in what we do. There's a little bit of art, there's a little bit of science, right? Science you can interpret as data. So if any of you are involved in user experience design or even industrial design, there's testing and validation of your ideas, right? As you come up with solutions to real problems. But if you're solutioning real problems, ultimately it's all about people. So I try to remind myself all along the way, there's a person here or human that is going to experience this thing, whether it's an app, whether it's a website, whether it's a piece of furniture, whatever. And so asking the right questions, particularly in a corporate environment where sometimes there is a sense of urgency to just ship product. You gotta ship, gotta ship, gotta ship. A lot of times, as far as my process goes, I try to ask questions that pump the brakes a little bit and make sure that we're delivering real value to customers and not just building something to build it because it's pretty. So that's, I guess, at a high level, how I evaluate my process along the way.
Pretty's cool too.
What's that?
Pretty is cool.
Oh,
too.
pretty is cool, yeah. We don't like ugly. That should be the name of our design firm. We don't like
Okay.
ugly.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay. Oh,
Hello. So y'all have clearly accomplished a lot over the last 2 decades in your creative work and your artistic work. Is there any creative outlet that you haven't really visited yet that you would like to get into?
so I like to tell people that my life is littered with artifacts that represent my best intentions. I currently have a sewing machine that's gathering dust in my basement.
I do too.
That's one of the things on my list that I'd like to do and look into. I also have an Arduino that's sitting on a shelf. Again, another good intention. If you're not familiar with Arduinos or Raspberry Pi, it's just a mini computer. And so one of my goals is to teach myself how to play with that thing to do something. I know that's super vague, and maybe that's why I haven't touched it. So I need to create a specific goal around that activity. I have goals related to the sewing machine, but I just haven't made the time to do it yet.
Yeah, time, even though it's finite, it seems like such a nebulous concept sometimes. But I have all these ideas and things I want to do, but then time gets eaten away. So yeah, I think we're both in the same boat in that we have different avenues or ventures that we want to try or want to do, but we're just focused on what we're doing right now.
You know, you don't see a lot of older designers out there usually. If you do see them, they tend to be the ones who own design firms. So that thought is in my head a lot. Okay, what am I going to do later on? And one of the things I want to do is own a restaurant, like a little burger thing. Maybe it's a little burger hut or shack. But yeah, that's something I think I could apply some creativity to, and maybe design the experience and have something compelling come out of that.
At least once a year, every other year, I open up an application for a fashion design school because that was really what I wanted to do, and I still want to do it. And it's 20 years after the fact, but maybe one day I'll be one of those 60-year-old fashion designers.
On Project Runway.
On Project Runway.
Make it work, baby.
I will.
We've got time for just one last question.
I've gone through a couple of different career changes in my history. You said something actually I really, really liked. It said, I don't belong, but I want to be there. Which is profound in the fact that I think we've all been in those type of situations where we're breaking into a new job or group of friends or new area. What are some of the things that you have done to help get over those obstacles of feeling like you don't belong, but you want to be there? Like, what are the things that kind of help motivate you to stick with it?
Might have to think on that one for a second. Do you want to go?
Yeah. I mean, there's two sides to that. There's kind of the professional side and personal side. I'll speak to professional side. You can friend request me later if you want to hear the personal stuff. I would, for you, I will. So I would say professionally, I've had to learn to appreciate the value of soft skills, and I know it's an overused word, whatever, but meaning not only am I a designer in that I create tangible and intangible things for humans, but it's worth taking a look at myself, evaluating my skills, and seeing if those skills are holding me back in any way. That's the first thing. The next thing I would say is trying to embrace the discomfort of that feeling of not belonging and questioning, okay, why do I feel this way? Is it because I'm not heard? Is it because I'm doubting my skills or ability to execute my job at a high level? Is it something else? And just kind of working through that discomfort. So if it's, hey, I don't feel like people are listening to my ideas, ask yourself why. Maybe my ideas are just dumb. But on the other side of that, maybe it's that I'm not delivering those ideas in a way that is empathetic to the situation. Maybe I need to just keep pushing through. I've had conversations with colleagues that are female, and they struggle with this sometimes. And I've also had that sentiment that, hey, maybe I'm not being heard or validated, and that's a real challenge for sure. But I think it's pushing through some of that discomfort and just grinding and being persistent in your pursuit of acceptance.
Spencer touched on empathy, and that really speaks to my experience with this. So I've stuck through maybe relationships or friendships or jobs a little bit too long, maybe a touch longer than too long, because I want to make sure everybody else is doing all right or make sure that they're feeling heard. This speaks to my design or the way I create or the way I do art too. I think of other people more than I do myself. So in that way, even in a corporate setting or the way that I work with my consultancy, like how can I make this product or this intangible thing work for this other person? How can I ask these questions that are going to elicit an answer that's going to help them? What can I do to reach a little bit further, to bring them out a little bit more? And sometimes you just have to get outside of yourself and not see, like, maybe I'm not fitting, like, how can I make somebody else fit, and how can I bring them in? That's kind of how I look at things.
Yeah, it's really easy to get, I'm thinking, I guess, in terms of, maybe this touches a nerve for me, but not having ideas accepted, and you kind of question yourself, like, what is it? Is it because I'm this or whatever? But I just want to reiterate, you just have to lean into that discomfort and really just try and push through. And pull the emotion out of it, and really take a practical look at a situation, and decide, okay, what are the variables I can change to achieve the outcome? There's a little bit of math coming back, right? It's all like a formula game. Okay.
Thank you, Spencer and Camille. Can we give them a round of applause?
Thank you, guys.
And thank you, everyone, for coming out this morning. It was awesome. This is our largest attended event so far, so we're so happy to have you here. As you go out, can you please drop your badges off at the front desk? And if you need any other refreshments, you can grab some of those too.
And be sure to let us know if you want to help volunteer. We'd love to have you.